it comes to NFL content here on YouTube, draft grades are far from a new concept. There's plenty of people out there who will talk about their favorite drafts or their least favorite drafts. People that have a channel dedicated to a specific team will focus on that team's draft. There's guys out there, like I did last year, who will talk about the draft in its entirety, but break it down into 8 videos going division by division. There's other people who will just make one video talking about the draft at large and be done with it. All of those are very valid and, quite frankly, correct ways of going about this whole draft content thing. However, because I wanted to be different, back in the month of May, I decided that I was going to do one video for every single NFL team. 32 videos throughout the months of May and June, talking about the draft and grading every single pick. Here we are at the end of August, and I still have 2 whole divisions left to do. So that didn't work out, and I found out very quickly why I had seen no one else do this. Now that being said, I made a commitment. I owe it to both myself and to you, the viewer, to complete this, to go through with these last 8 teams, these last 2 divisions, and hand out my grades for the 2024 NFL Draft. Now that being said, because we are in late August, preseason has ended, cut day is either rapidly approaching or in the past by the time you're watching these videos, and we've seen camp and, the development that these rookies are already undergoing. Just know that that's not really factoring into these grades. Now, there have been a couple exceptions here and there. I make sure to disclose when those are, but for the most part, these grades were grades that I wrote down in, early May and have stuck to. Now, that being said, if there's a grade that is already showing signs of aging poorly, then I will tell you, hey, this is how I felt about this player before the draft. However, it looks like he's already starting to prove me wrong. I will happily admit that, and we can all laugh at me taking forever and being a big, dumb, stupid idiot. Also with that, please try to keep in mind that I'm not trying to say that I am better or know better than any of the GMs that get mentioned in these videos. I'm just a 21-year-old college kid who spent what little free time he had during the spring, taking a look at film and scouting prospects and doing what I could to the best of my ability. And I like sharing my opinions on this kind of stuff. You guys seem to like it when I share my opinion on this kind of stuff, so I'm going to continue to do it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Los Angeles Rams and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. Man, I really don't know how to feel about the Rams, just point blank period, because there's a lot I like about this team, right? I love Puka Nacua. I was a huge fan of his. He was the steal of the draft last year. Kyren Williams looks great. I've always loved Matthew Stafford, even as a Bears fan. I knew what he was capable of, and he's still capable of it. Love Kobe Turner. Thought he should have won Rookie of the Year last year. Thought he was absolutely robbed. Byron Young looked great last year. You have some solid offensive line pieces. Cooper Kupp's still Cooper Kupp, and you added some players this year in the draft that I'm a huge fan of. But then the Ernest Jones trade happens, and you trade the perfect linebacker for your defense for pennies on the dollar. Aaron Donald ended up retiring this offseason. Tre'Davious White is one of your starting corners. The offensive line, too, the more I look at it, you got Alaric Jackson's going to miss some games. There's just some weird stuff going on with this team, and they made a draft pick we'll talk about that I also think was very, very weird. But I still think there's plenty of reason to be optimistic, right? Like, part of me was starting to think this team might compete with the 49ers for the division, and there's a world where that still happens, but I'm less confident in it now. That being said, I still think this is a playoff team, one that can go deeper than they went last year, and part of the reason for that is because of some of the guys they picked up in the draft this year, starting out with Jared Verse, the edge rusher out of Florida State. In my opinion, the perfect pick for the Rams here in the first round. We know the Rams are kind of allergic to this area of the draft, so seeing them not only get to pick here this year, but getting, in my opinion, almost a steal in Jared Verse at 19. I thought he was easily one of the 11 best players in this class, the 4th defensive player on my board, the 2nd edge rusher on my board behind Laiatu Latu, who, if you didn't hear my thoughts on him, I made my Colts video already. But I love Verse. Verse is, in my opinion, one of 2 edge rushers in this class that I think are like a certified 100% will be a number one, like, alpha edge in this league. Him and Latu are two guys that I'm super, super high on. I think there's guys that have that potential, but, like, as a surefire, I'd put money on it. Verse and Latu, for my money, are the two most likely to achieve that. Taking a look at what Verse does well, great first step. Really good closing speed to kind of hawk down ball carriers downfield. Relentless, hyperactive rusher with, like, this really unpredictable style of play. He's really good at switching up how he wants to attack tackles and, you know, how he wants to go about any given play, which is obviously fantastic. You want to keep guys guessing as much as possible. He's got enough ankle flexion to turn the corner without losing a lot of momentum. He has really, really aggressive leg drive, always keeps his legs moving, and he pairs that with that energetic, high motor nature that allows him to sustain his extensions. He's able to forklift blockers with ease. His initial strike is deadly accurate and often knocks blockers upright. He's able to manipulate tackles by flashing his hands before firing inside with a swift, strong bull rush thanks to that quickness and those really, really strong, really, really active and aggressive legs. He has a really solid bag of moves with swipes and chops primarily at his disposal. He takes smart lanes to the quarterback by quickly locating the path of least resistance. He's very hyper aware when it comes to picking that path and figuring out what the best way to attack the guy across from him is. He's a violent run defender who can swiftly and effectively stack and shed with violent hands, and his instincts in both facets of the game, whether it's run defense or pass rushing, are very notable. That being said, not the longest guy, not the most well-built guy. I'm not going to say he's built bad, you know, but his frame's a little short of perfect, right? Same thing with his hips. Not bad, he's not, you know, stiff, but a little less than elite in terms of flexibility. His frame is a little high cut, which is going to hinder his ability to change directions in the open field. You want to see his pad level be a little bit more consistent, especially on stunts. Read options will trip him up from time to time. His footwork needs just a little bit of polish, and that quick first step can get him in trouble, as there are moments where he's going to get into the backfield a little too quickly, which allows the running back to see what's happening, and then he can redirect and get out of the way of Verse. But, you know, all of those are very minor things. You know, there are guys in this league who are far less athletic that have made long, successful careers for themselves. So I'm not exactly worried about that aspect of it. And the other thing is just a tiny little bit of polish. I really like this pick because you look at that front seven, you lose Aaron Donald. That's huge. As much as I love Kobe Turner, he can't do it alone. He's great, and he's an incredible football player. He's not Aaron Donald, right? I don't have to tell anybody that. We all know that. He's an incredible player in his own right, though. So instead of having Aaron Donald, you now have Turner, you have Verse, you have Byron Young, you have Michael Hoyt, who's going to make plays. You have Bobby Brown as your nose tackle, who I think is a really solid run defender. You've got some guys down there as a collective that you can get excited about. I really like this pickup. I think this is great for the Rams. This is exactly what they needed. I saw a lot of people talking that they, you know, probably should have attacked offense first, because, or at least going into the draft. I think after the draft, once Verse was the pick, everyone kind of got over that. But I can remember seeing a lot of dialogue around the Rams should attack offense because this is the first time they've had a first-round pick in God knows how long. McVay's going to want offense. It's a really good tackle class. And while I understand that, I think Verse was the perfect pick for them. I didn't think Verse would be there at 19. So not only to get him to fall to you, but, you know, to end up with him on your roster is absolutely incredible work. And then 20 picks later, they make, in my opinion, one of, if not the worst pick of the 2024 NFL draft. I'm not going to say the worst because the Michael Penix pick happened, but it's definitely in the running for number 2. Trading up for Braden Fisk, giving up a second-round pick next year to go up and get Braden Fisk, in my opinion, is absolute malpractice. I simply do not see it. Now, you know, I love this coaching staff. I really like this culture that they've built, what they've been able to do with defensive linemen, how they've been able to develop and grow guys. And maybe they'll prove me wrong sooner rather than later. And honestly, I would love to be wrong because, quite frankly, I love the idea of Fisk and Verse getting to stay together, getting to play football for the foreseeable future. and kind of getting to be those saviors that the Rams' front seven needs after the retirement of Aaron Donald. I love that storyline that's being built, right? I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. That being said, the scout, for lack of better words, I mean, I'm not a scout, the amateur film consumer, I guess. The amateur film consumer in me doesn't like Fisk at all. Quite frankly, I thought he was easily one of the most interesting prospects, I guess is the best way I can say it without getting too mean. Like, for example, on my draft board, I have, the player name, their school, a grade, their year, height, weight, all that good stuff. And I also have style/scheme. So you look at a guy like Byron Murphy, who was the first defensive tackle off the board. I said 3 technique. That's where he's going to be at his best, right? For Jared Verse, I put true alpha #1 edge, because that's what he is. He's the alpha. He's the Batman to Byron Young's Robin. For Braden Fisk, it's just stunt specialist, I guess, because there's really not a whole lot here. Like, I get it. The average fan, and I'm not saying if you're consuming this video, you are the average fan, or if you like Braden Fisk, you are the average or casual fan. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who know even more about ball than I do that like Fisk, because I understand the appeal. Unreal athlete, incredibly fluid, tested off the charts, super high motor, fights the good fight on a down-to-down basis, lightning quick off the snap, got a decent amount of pop in his hands at the point of attack. He's got consistent pad level, and he has the potential to play inside, he can play outside, he's got a little bit of that versatility. However, I have never seen a defensive lineman, or any pass rusher for that matter, that was less effective at rushing the quarterback in my life than Braden Fisk. Now, he's going to cook on stunts and, design things where you're designing him to go around a blocker, where you're not having him engage with a blocker. But if you tell this man to shed a block, you might as well tell him to sit out the play. Like, I don't... Someone described it, I can't remember who for the life of me. They said it was like watching a Magikarp. If you play Pokemon, Magikarp, his signature move is Splash, where you do it, it shows the little fish, he bounces up and down, and then the text box says, but nothing happened. And that's kind of what happens, because you see Fisk and he runs up to the line and he's doing all this stuff, he's trying his ass off, and very rarely does something come of it. He has no plan as a pass rusher. He's really bad at shedding blocks. And then as a run defender, he's not good because he's undersized. He's only 295 pounds, doesn't have much of a power profile, doesn't have much of an anchor, not really good at diagnosing run plays. On top of that, he's skinny, his arms are short, so he's not great at wrapping up ball carriers. There's just, for me, a lot not to like about Fisk, and he's coming out as a 6th-year senior, so it's not even like this is some kid that's coming out, as a redshirt sophomore, and you're like, holy shit. He's got a lot of potential. He's only 21 years old. We can sit him for a few years. He's 24. That's kind of when you get to that put up or shut up point as a prospect, where it's like, if I'm drafting you, you better be ready to go sooner rather than later. And I don't see that with Fisk. Now, again, maybe this culture and this environment, him getting to work with Jared Verse and him getting to work with Kobe Turner and him getting to work with this defensive staff will fire something in him, right? Light a fire in him and make me look stupid. Because that's the thing, I want to make it clear. Unless I specify in these videos, like, I don't like this guy, which I think there might have been one example of in all of the draft classes, and it was for somebody that I think is a legitimate, not good person. I'm not rooting against any of these guys. I want to be wrong if I think they're not the best pick possible, right? Because that makes football more fun. The more talented players there are, the more good draft picks there are, the more fun the league is. I don't want everybody to have bad drafts and every draft pick to be bad. It's just, I don't see it with Fisk. Point blank period. I don't see the appeal. Let me rephrase it. I see the appeal. I don't see him being worth a 2nd round pick. I had a 4th round grade on him. I think if you want to take a flyer in the 4th round on day 3, you say, hey, there's traits there, let's see what happens. Absolutely. Sure. That's a flyer at that point. we're not taking flyers at pick 39, and we're sure as hell not trading a future second-round pick to take a goddamn flyer. You look at some of the guys still available. Chris Jenkins out of Michigan, one of the best defensive linemen in this class. Would have loved to see them take him. Michael Hall, I will give them a pass for, because Michael Hall ended up being a piece of shit. But at the time, he would have been a much better pick. So, again, I will give them their credit for dodging that bullet. And if you really wanted this, like, full developmental defensive lineman, Mason Smith was right there. Mason Smith, he's big and super athletic and can shed a block or two. That would have been a much better pickup. And, you know, I tore the Jaguars to shreds for taking him. But honestly, you wouldn't have had to trade up for him. And I trust the Rams coaching staff way more than I trust Jacksonville's. One of the big reasons why I tore the Jaguars apart is because I have no faith in their coaching staff to develop anybody. Meanwhile, the Rams, they turned Kobe Turner, who was a third-round pick, into a Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate. And like I said, the guy I thought deserved Defensive Rookie of the Year. And that, a little bit, makes me feel like I could be wrong here. And again, I want to be. I am actively hoping I am. I want a Rams fan to come back to this video, you know, next summer after Braden Fisk has a 10-sack season or whatever and say, man, you were off the mark. And I can say, yeah, but it happens. You can't all be perfect, right? That's the hope here. But at the end of the day, I'm sticking to my guns. I think if they had just stayed put and made this pick, this would have been like a D+, because then I could see the upside and be a lot more like, okay, you know, there's something here. They did a good job with Kobe last year. Still rich for my taste. Still don't love the player, but I see it. Trading up and giving up a second-round pick next year when a lot of your big pieces are still old and you're about to see a lot of roster turnover is unforgivable. That is what makes this an F. The pick itself is still not good, but the trade makes it one of the worst moves of the draft period. Thankfully, however, about 50 picks later, they go and take Blake Corum, the running back out of Michigan, and I adore this pick. Absolutely love it. I think this is the perfect pick for them. Blake Corum was my RB2 behind Braylon Allen. I think he is an incredible football player. Not the first person to say this. Reminds me a lot of Kyren Williams. I'm sure Rams fans, you're tired of hearing that. But let me give you a little bit more nuance. I'm somebody who is a very big fan of a running back room being comprised of guys who do different things. With two guys like Corum and Williams, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. They're undersized, they have great vision, they're quick. The difference is I think Corum is a much better power runner. He's somebody I think has a lot more power to his game, whereas I think Williams is a better pass catcher. And that's great. That is fantastic. That means you have a running back room where these two can coexist, and if they're taking snaps from each other, you're getting something different. It's not redundant, and I adore that. So taking a look at Corum here, strong guy, stout frame, good speed, good burst, possesses the ability to accelerate very well in the open field. Vision is exceptional. Him and Kyren Williams, both that stands out with them. He's incredibly decisive behind the line of scrimmage. He's able to make quick cuts to evade defenders, possesses a killer jump cut, one of the prettiest moves in football. He has excellent change of direction for cutbacks and redirecting himself while in space. He has elite contact balance. He's very difficult to bring down because of his low center of gravity. Because he is on the shorter side, he's somebody that will get lost behind the offensive line. And when I say that, I don't mean like he doesn't know where he's at. I mean, defenders can't locate him. Because you think this is somebody who is 5'8", 205 pounds. It's not exactly easy to find him when you got these big, powerful offensive linemen ahead of him, which the Rams have done a great job of getting these big, hulking, powerful linemen to comprise their offensive line of. It's not easy to find him. So because he can get lost behind his offensive line, that gives him extra time. He's very patient to find holes with that extra time. He can fight for tough yardage and really contort his way in for scores on the goal line. Does a great job following his blocker, which as a fullback enjoyer, I can really appreciate. I love a running back that knows how to take advantage of having that extra blocker. He's really good at capitalizing on the extra space that he's going to get. We'll talk about somebody I think can kind of do a little bit of that here towards the end of the video. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Think Ben Skoranek. We'll talk about it. He's a very competent pass blocker with good awareness, and when he was used as a receiver, he was efficient. But that being said, not the biggest guy in the world, doesn't matter. Not the most explosive guy in the world, doesn't matter. And he tore his ACL in 2022, but he shows no signs of that slowing him down, so I don't think that's the biggest deal in the world. To put it bluntly, the way I look at this is Corum is the Thunder to Kyren Williams' kind of lightning. Like, obviously, Williams isn't this super explosive speedster like a Darren Sproles or whatever. Usually when you think Thunder Lightning, you think hulking power back and a tiny little quick back. As a Bears fan, my favorite example of that I've seen in my lifetime was Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. Not quite that, but, a version of that, right? The Rams version of that. And I like what the Rams have done a lot with their running back room. Those two, as well as they got Cody Schrader, UDFA. Ronnie Rivers is still there. Very interesting running back room. I'm very excited to see how that running back room is going to play out long term. And then also in the third round, 16 picks later, they take Kamren Kinchens, the safety out of Miami. I think Kinchens is a solid player. Had a late third round grade on him. You take him here in the late third round. That's good value. He was my safety 6. My only complaint with this, my reasoning for this being an A- and not an A or an A+, is I thought there were better safeties on the board. Most notably Malik Mustafa, who ended up being my number 1 safety. I thought he was an incredible football player. I think he can do for you everything Kinchens is going to do, and then some. And then the stuff that he can do for you that Kinchens can do, he's better at. But not the end of the world. Just a slight tick on the draft grade. But taking a look at Kinchens as a player, very aggressive playmaking free safety. He's a really, really rangy player. Not somebody who has great long speed, but he's a lot better at, kind of attacking the ball than you would think, given that quote-unquote deficiency in terms of his speed, because of an instinctive trigger and really good acceleration. He has good read and react skills from deep zones. He displays fluid hips and good acceleration to kind of turn and burn downfield. He's an instinctive player with excellent ball production, including 11 interceptions over the last 2 years. And he loves coming to hit downhill, though he's going to dip his head a good bit and will whiff. And honestly, that's kind of the best way to describe what he is as a player, is that aggression. He's a super, super aggressive, instinctive player that will get a lot of turnovers for you and play the ball really well, but he'll also, over pursue, take a bad angle, guess wrong, and that will lead to busted coverage. It'll lead to him getting burnt and out of position. It'll lead to missed tackles. He's a very high risk, high reward type of player. Like, his missed tackle rate is really bad. 14% and 19% over the last 2 years. He has shorter arms, he dips his head, and he does a poor job of breaking down at the tackle point. So that's not ideal, and he's not somebody you're going to want to play in the box, really. Reminds me a lot of Eddie Jackson. And if you know me as a Bears fan, you know I hate Eddie Jackson. He had one great year in 2018, and that was peak Eddie Jackson, where he was guessing right, and he was trying. But then Eddie Jackson every year after that was not very good. He was a good deep safety, and he did his job, but if you asked him to make a play or, God forbid, tackle somebody, it was like pulling teeth. That being said, I think Kinchens is a much better tackler than Jackson, especially in terms of willingness and effort. That was always my big thing with Jackson. He gave up on a lot of plays. If the ball was coming his way, I think of one play in particular against the New York Giants. Saquon Barkley was running the ball up the middle at him, and instead of stepping in front of Saquon, he tried to tackle him from the side because it looked like he was almost afraid to get run over. Kinchens isn't like that. In that position, he's going to get in front of Saquon. Saquon might just sidestep him because his head's down. And honestly, I would rather have somebody who has deficiencies in terms of their technique rather than deficiencies in terms of their heart. So Kinchens is like everything you'd want a guy like Eddie Jackson to be. There's some development to be done, and I think he's an exciting player. But again, I would have much rather seen them take Malik Mustafa. He does all that kind of stuff and you don't have to worry about the tackling issues and the over-aggression. I guess with a slight sacrifice of how aggressive he is, because Mustafa isn't quite as aggressive, but sometimes not being super aggressive is a good thing. But, it's clear the Rams had a type. It's clear they saw what they wanted, and that's perfectly fine. Just based off my evaluations, I don't think Kinchens was necessarily the perfect pick here, but he was definitely a good one and a smart one. So I can't get mad at that. Definitely understand the appeal there. And then you skip over the 4th round, get into the 5th round. They take Brennan Jackson, the edge rusher out of Washington State. Really solid player. Not somebody I watched before the draft. Full transparency there. But I did go back and watch after the draft, and he's just your classic third edge, right? He's good at a lot of things, not really great at anything. Not somebody who's necessarily athletic enough to be on the field every down, but, as a compliment to some of these other guys, right? You've got Verse and Young as your 1-2 punch now to add some depth there with Michael Hoyt and Nick Hampton. I think this is a solid pickup. He's got a great first step, quick feet, adequate speed for somebody who's a little bit bigger at the edge position. He's very relentless to win the leverage battle off the snap. He's able to anticipate well in the run and is relatively consistent at splashing into the backfield. Hot motor, tries his ass off every play. He has a bull rush, a push-pull swim move, and a rip move, all with a decent win rate in his arsenal. And he has enough play strength to set a pretty hard edge against the run. So he's somebody that's going to be a good run defender, has the juice to win as a pass rusher from time to time. That being said, he plays upright, not the twitchiest guy in the world, has a thinner lower half, which is going to hurt his anchor, and he doesn't have the greatest gap discipline against the run. Also, another guy that's going to be 24 as a rookie, not quite ideal, but again, as somebody that you're not expecting a whole ton of in terms of upside, you're just saying, hey, we need depth in the edge room. It's the 5th round. We think this guy can do that. Then, by all means, I think that's a good pick. My only complaint here is I did think there were better edge rushers on the board. The big one I'd go to is Mo Camara from Colorado State. He'd be another great guy to add to this room as a rotational edge rusher. But beggars can't be choosers. Again, this is another one of those things where I have my preference, but I still think it's a good pick. Right, the difference between this being an A and an A+ isn't going to kill the overall grade or anything like that. So it's not the end of the world. And then 42 picks later, they take Tyler Davis, the defensive tackle out of Clemson, who has a decent bit in common with Braden Fisk. Really good backup to Braden Fisk. Why is this an A and Fisk is an F? Well, they didn't trade up for him, and also this is the 6th round and not the 2nd round. Right? Not a lot of defensive tackles on the board at this point that I would, pound the table for. I'd say the only one would probably be Leonard Taylor III out of Miami. He ended up going undrafted, so the entire league missed on him. Ended up making the Jets final 53, though. Shout out to him. But that being said, he's just another guy who doesn't have much in the way of a pass rushing profile, doesn't have great pad level, but he's a little bit bigger, 6'2", 301 pounds. Not the biggest guy in the world, but bigger and built wider than Fisk. Good first step, good acceleration, good lateral quickness. He's disruptive, he's stocky, he's got strong leg drive. He's able to hold his ground from time to time with consistent effort, balance, and a strong upper body. He has strong, stocky arms that are impactful in spite of them not being super long. He has good pop at the point of attack, and he can push the pocket as a pass rusher. Not somebody you're ever going to expect to be like a nose tackle or anything, but as like a 4-eye in their 3-4 defense. Like I said, as a backup to Braden Fisk, good value, good player, or good enough player rather. No one here that I'm pounding the table for other than Taylor, but again, the whole league missed out on him, so I can't exactly be mean to the Rams for that. Also in the 6th round, they took Joshua Carty, a kicker out of Stanford. I don't watch kickers, so I don't know anything about this guy. He made the final 53, if I'm not mistaken. He did. He is their starting kicker. They must have saw something in him. That's great. Went to Stanford, got a good head on his shoulders. But that's where we're going to leave that, because I'm not going to talk on a guy that I've never watched play football. As we move 4 picks later, they take Jordan Whittington, the wide receiver out of Texas. And man, I wish I would have been in a position to talk more about this guy pre-draft. I tried to make my top receivers video, and that fell through the cracks. I was going to make top 30, I watched 35. I was going to rank my top 30 receivers in one video. Didn't get around to it. And man, I would have raved about Jordan Whittington. I love this dude. At a late 4th round grade on him. You get him in the 6th round. Beautiful value. Reminds me a lot of two players that this team should be pretty intimately familiar with in Juwan Jennings of the San Francisco 49ers, as well as Ben Skoranek, as just that like big pseudo wing tight end move player. It's a really aggressive, really physical blocker. He's deceptively fast after the catch. He's able to use a mix of strength, contact balance, and elusiveness to threaten after the catch as well. Averaged 6.8 yards per play after the catch in 2023. He locates and manipulates zones quickly and effectively. He does a good job pacing with intermediate routes. He's able to threaten with free releases. He's a good route runner, but his best work as a route runner comes on outside breaking routes after faking digs or crossing routes. He displays some patience and detail in his route running when trying to close the gap between him and a defender before engaging with his break. He flashes a little tempo variation and deception at the top of his routes. There are glimpses of the ability to threaten vertically and attack the ball in the air in his game. Very strong hands catcher who attacks the ball and can play a bit of bully ball at the catch point with nearby defenders. He has good focus and finishing ability even as contact is coming. And my favorite thing about his game, he is a tenacious blocker from the slot. Ben Skoranek is gone. This team does not have that like pseudo wing tight end, wide receiver, fullback, do-it-all weapon on offense anymore. Enter Jordan Whittington. That is what this man is, if you ask me. I think he can play that role very, very well. Now, you do have to worry about the durability. He had multiple injuries early in his career, but his final year was healthy, thankfully. He doesn't have a lot of suddenness or burst, which isn't great, but if you were watching him in the preseason, he seemed pretty sudden. He had some good bursts, so hopefully he's been working on that throughout the summer, and that's something he's added to his game. Doesn't have great top speed, but he's a slot receiver. You're not expecting him to be Tyreek Hill and burn guys downfield. You have Tutu Atwell for that. Despite flashes of really, really good route running and being pretty consistent, he's no elite route runner. And there were some drops in 2023 that are definitely notable. But this is back-to-back years now where the Rams take a wide receiver I liked on day 3 that I think can be something. Now, is Jordan Whittington going to be Puka Nacua? Probably not, because that is kind of a unicorn of a player. But God, wouldn't it be cool if he was? Wouldn't that just be so sick? I think that would be really cool. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd love to be wrong. I would love for Whittington to come out and set rookie records. But realistically, I think he's going to be like one of these Juwan Jennings, Ben Skoranek, do-it-all slot receivers. And that's great, because the Rams needed a guy like that. Then a couple picks later, you take Bo Limmer, the center out of Arkansas. I wasn't super high on Limmer, like a lot of people were. I thought he was definitely a day 3 center. I did think, however, he was worth more than a 6th round pick. I had a late 4th round grade on him. Really athletic, really explosive. His good hip bend and his hand work, working inside the chest of defenders is really, really nice. He runs his feet through contact and keeps defenders occupied throughout the rep. He has a good feel for angles as a blocker, both at the line and once he gets up to the second level. His eyes are really, really good and allow him to adjust quickly to post-snap movement. He shows the ability to unlock his hips and ankles to recover with a pretty stout anchor after initial punches kind of jar him. And he is pretty good at identifying things pre and post-snap as a center, which is great. Not the strongest guy in the world. He doesn't have the best footwork in the world, but as a center, as a developmental center, I think you could do a lot worse. I think this is a solid pick. I think this is great value. I think this is somebody that, long-term could end up being a starter for the Rams at center. I don't think he's going to be able to play guard. I know he played guard in college. I don't foresee that being the case with that footwork and some of the length issues and things of that nature, but definitely good value. And then finally, in the 7th round, KT Leviston, the offensive lineman out of Kansas State. Not going to lie, didn't watch him. I saw him in passing watching Cooper Beebe and a couple other guys, but he's not somebody I personally sat down and evaluated. He's on IR right now, which sucks, but maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. Either way, 7th round pick, not the end of the world if he doesn't turn into something. But as a whole, I think the Rams did pretty good. However, Braden Fisk is a blemish on this report card. unfortunately, because of that being a second-round pick and them trading up in the second round to make that pick, that is going to hurt their grade. I'm going to give them a B+. If this Fisk, I'll put it this way, if they didn't trade up for Fisk, this would be in the A- territory. They'd taken someone different. If they'd taken Chris Jenkins, this draft would be an A+. If they had taken somebody closer to the defensive tackle that Jacksonville took, I already forgot the name of. Why am I not thinking of his name? Mason Smith. If they had taken Mason Smith, this would be closer to an A- or an A. But that being said, I think overall you get a couple guys that are going to make an impact right away in Whittington and Verse and Corum and Carty and Jackson and Kinchens. Some guys that are going to be fun to watch develop, some guys that have some interesting things going for them and will become interesting chess pieces for the Rams long term. And I really hope I'm wrong on Fisk. I really, really do. I don't want to be the asshole that was right by saying he was one of the worst picks of the draft, but future is interesting for the Rams. I was going to say it's bright, but Stafford's on the older side, and I can't say the future is bright if the team doesn't have a young quarterback in place yet. So I like the draft. I think they did very well. Some fun players. It's going to be a fun year to watch the Rams. I think they're going to be a fun team and a very, very interesting team going forward.
Had a chance on the throwback. This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder.
Wow. Using that